Are you tired of being told what to think and how to act? Well, you are not alone. In case you haven't realized it, you have an internal GPS. It knows all you need to know about how to live your life. So it's about time you stopped letting the media and the government tell you what is true for you. In fact, it is exactly that time. It's time to think for yourself. And here to make sure you're doing just that is your host, mediator, author, and lawyer, Carol Gold.
Hi, it's Monday, December 9th. I'm Carol Gold, and welcome to Think for Yourself. My apologies for missing last week's episode, but I actually want to spend this episode explaining why. And the reason it's important is because two things happened to me in the last week, actually the last 10 days, that have pretty important messages for all of us at this time. So I'm going to deviate a little bit from my normal podcasting kind of MO, which is to look at the political situation around the world and to try to find higher meaning. And I'm going to do it by looking at a personal situation and still finding the higher meaning or meanings that are available, certainly that were available to me and that I want to share with you. It isn't that there is not a lot of national and international foreign policy news. There's so much news going on right now on so many fronts. But at the same time, I think from everything I've experienced and everything that I'm hearing from the people that I interact with, there's a lot of stress going on. And I don't know quite where it's coming from, but we could all use a little relief and a little respite from it. And that's why I'm going to share with you an experience I had and what came out of it. About 9 days ago, I experienced a concussion. It was brought on by the fact that I have a cat who, like a dog, walks on a leash with a harness. And I take him out twice a day. And we were out about 9 days ago, and he decided he wanted to run. And so I thought I would run along with him. He was on the leash. It was very cold, and I had on a very bulky winter kind of jacket with a hood. And the hood, because it came up and over my head, kind of obstructed my peripheral vision. And suddenly, while I was running, I didn't see the curb. And so down I went, face down, on asphalt. And he broke away at that point, and he kept running. So I was stunned, obviously. Should have been much more hurt than I actually was at the time. I was bloody, my hand was bloody, my knee, the exterior of my nose. And I didn't realize the extent of my injury. I saw the blood, but I also was very concerned because he had taken off. And I saw him in the distance, so I got myself up and I ran toward him. And I almost put my foot on his leash, which was dragging behind him, but he ran away at the last second. I caught up with him a second time, put my foot on the leash, and he managed to pull out and kept going back toward the direction he had come from. In the community where I am temporarily living in South Carolina, because they get a lot of rain in the spring and the fall, the newer communities are built with these sort of underground large piping systems that allow the water as it runs off down the roads to go underground. And that happens because every so many hundreds of feet, they're almost like sewer openings would be with manhole covers, but they're concrete slabs that are slightly raised off the ground, maybe 8 inches, so that the water can flow through that raised area. And to get down in there, you have to lift these manhole-type covers that are inset into the concrete. Well, the cat, when he took off the second time, ran down into one of those raised areas underground and into the piping system. And I saw where he went, so I came up to that particular entrance and crouched down, and I, of course, couldn't get in there. It's only about an 8-inch clearance. I looked down, I called him, nothing. I heard echoing coming back from the piping. So I knew there was nothing I could do at the moment, so I came home. I kind of cleaned off my wounds, put antiseptic and Band-Aids and whatever. And then I went out looking for him again. And I looked and I looked and I could not find him. And so when I came home the second time, I was a little panicked over my own injuries, but also him. He was lost and He was in a lead in a harness. He could get stuck anywhere. And so I reached out to a friend of mine in Santa Fe who, when I told her what was going on, after we talked about it a little bit, she said, why don't you call the water company? And I thought, wow, that's a great idea, except it's Thanksgiving weekend and they're not going to be there. And then I immediately thought, I'll call the fire department. So I called the fire department and I told them what had happened, and they said they would send someone. And I didn't know how soon or who they would send. And in the interim, I called two other friends of mine who, like my friend in Santa Fe, are metaphysical in nature, spiritual, and I asked them to both pray and send light and try to zero in on him and keep him calm and keep him in the area. In the meantime, within 10 minutes, I would say, a fire truck pulled into the community. 3 firemen got out of the truck. I explained to them exactly what had happened, and they immediately got a crowbar, took the top off of the manhole cover, and one of them, tied to a rope, jumped down and went into the tunnel system as far as he could with a flashlight, and he couldn't see anything. He called him and he said to me, I don't see him, I don't hear him. And I said, okay, well, thank you. He came up, and then he went up to the next section, maybe several hundred feet up, pulled the manhole cover off of that, went down in, came back up and said, I don't see a thing. And I said, okay, well, thank you so much for coming out. And then he said to me, down in the original hole that he went in, there are 2 pipes. They lead in 2 different directions. One leads back up into the community, and it is pitch black in that pipe. The other pipe leads out of the community into a farm next to this community, and there's light at the end of that tunnel because the sunlight is at the end of that tunnel. And he said a cat isn't going to go into pitch blackness because they can't see. I'll bet if he went anywhere and he's not trapped, he went toward the pipe that leads out to the light, and he's in the direction of that farm. So I thanked them, and I immediately went off walking in that direction. And when I got outside of this community and got over to the farm area, I saw where the pipe opened up and emptied out. And I headed for that area, and when I did, I started calling him. And in a matter of seconds, he walked out from the brush and toward me, and I picked him up, so relieved, carried him home. And as I was coming home, the firemen were still sitting there in their truck, and I kind of held him up and waved to them, and they waved to me, and I thanked them. And when I got home, I called my friends who I asked to pray and help me out on this one from a distance, and thanked them all for their efforts. And then I called the fire department, and I thanked them, because quite honestly, I was astonished at their rapid response and the seriousness with which they took what was clearly my trauma. But even though it was about a cat and not a person and not a fire and not an EMT or what they usually deal with, they treated it with the utmost respect and concern. And truly, it was the result of the one fireman who indicated to me where he thought the cat might have gone that was the actual reason that I was able to find him, along with prayer. That's part 1. And there's a message here, but I want to save it till part 2. Part 2 is that fall caused me to have a concussion. And so a day later, I wound up at urgent care. And it wasn't a critical concussion. It was a mild concussion. It still is a mild concussion. And it's taken me about 7 or 8 days to recover. I'm pretty much back to myself. All my scrapes and wounds are healed. And over those last 7 or 8 days, because if you've ever had a concussion, you know that light or loud sound, certainly reading, television, the iPad, the iPhone, the computer screens, all of that is an irritant. And so I couldn't do any of it. Certainly not for the first 5 days. So what happened? I discovered a world that I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Without the technology, and actually almost without the ability to read, I discovered life as it existed before the technology, before we became addicted to it, before it infringed on every part of our lives. I felt and heard and experienced the pace, and let's call it the frequency, of nature, of life without the technology. And it was remarkable. It was a completely different life. It was a completely different experience. My world seemed calmer and slower and more focused. And it wasn't just because of the concussion and the limitation. It was visceral. The difference between the pace at which the technology not only causes us to function, but the intrusion, every chirp of the phone, every email that comes in, every call, every text, they never stop unless you turn your phone off at night or put it in a Faraday bag so you don't even hear it. It's a never-ending, never-releasing pressure that is put upon us. And without it, it's as if I could hear the world again and feel the world again. Look, I am an empath. I've been an intuitive my whole life. And so feeling is my thing, right? I mean, I'm highly able, acutely able, I guess I would say, to feel what goes on with other people and with nature. But even me, even the way I'm wired, the stark difference between what I could feel and what life felt like without the technology versus with it was riveting. And I loved it. I really loved it. I felt calmer. I felt more focused. I felt more grounded. I felt more connected to people. I felt more connected to nature. I just felt more human and less like I was on a treadmill running as fast as I could run just to keep up with the pace of life. I share this experience with you, all of it, from the very beginning, from falling down and what happened with the cat, the fireman, to how I lived these last 8 days, 7, 8 days, whatever it's been, without the technology, really until today. I share it with you because I take away 2 important messages for myself, and if they work for you, great. And if they don't, as I always like to say, set them down like excess luggage and keep walking. The first is, we really need each other. We really need each other. Life flows so much better when we're connected. I truly believe that it was reaching out to my friend in Santa Fe who suggested the water company that triggered the thought of calling the fire department. I really believe it was her involvement that was instrumental in events as they unfolded. I really believe that calling my other friends and asking them to pray, meditate, send light, particularly to the cat, try to keep him focused and calm, really worked. I really believe that the fire company who came because I set into motion a series of events by the very nature of the fact that I reached out. Because so many of us don't want to share our vulnerability. So many of us don't want to share what we perceive as weakness. So many of us have lived in a world where, certainly since COVID, many of us have felt we have to do things on our own and alone. And it isn't true. I always used to say if we were meant to totally be on our own, whoever created whatever created, God as I see it, this planet, this universe, would have given each one of us a planet. But that's not the way it works. We're all here together and we're all connected for a reason. And it's that connection that weaves the most beautiful, I'll call it a golden web. Maybe it's nothing more than the hologram we often refer to in physics, that keeps us all connected in a beautiful way. And when our intentions are pure and our hearts are all in the same place, miracles happen. Truly, miracles happen. And I feel like that's what happened that day. Because not only should I have been much more seriously injured than I was, I fell face down on asphalt. I should have broken I shouldn't even say that. I could have broken my nose. I could have done serious damage to my head. I had a mild concussion and some scrape burns from sliding on the asphalt. I could have lost my cat that day. He could have gotten tangled up somewhere underground and either died there or been vulnerable to attack from another animal. But he was able to get himself out of his harness and leash, get out of the pipe, and hang around long enough for me to retrieve him and bring him home. All of that is the result of reaching out, connection, and the power of the human heart and the power of intention. I believe all of that deeply in my soul. The other message is, the other message is so obvious. I don't know how you or I, on an ongoing basis, truly limit this technology and its infringement on our lives. But what I experienced in the last 8 days was so beautiful and so peaceful and so natural and so human. And it felt like something that I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Despite my efforts to calm myself and meditate and read metaphysical books and read fiction for enjoyment and take walks and swim and do all the things I do to nurture and nourish myself, they pale in comparison to the damage that the technology is doing to each of us. And that's not even discussing the actual damage by the transmissions that come out of those devices that go into our ears, that go into our brains, that are altering us in ways that we yet don't even understand, and not for the good either. You know, I was listening the other day to a woman who's been a lifelong intuitive. Her name is, I think it's Mary Handclough. And she was being interviewed and she was asked to do like a prediction, not a prediction, but a projection into the future. What if in 25 years or 30 years, a time capsule is found that she left? What is it that she would want the message to be when it was opened up? And her answer was instantaneous. She didn't even have to think about it. And she said, I would say that if AI still exists, humanity needs to destroy it. Wow. And I heard her say that and I thought to myself, yeah, after the last 8 or 9 days, I totally understand. Because it's robbing us of our humanity. It's robbing us of true connection to one another. It's robbing us of our connection to nature. And it's robbing us to the experience of being a divine being in a human body. It's a total infringement on what I believe is the intelligent design of this universe. So, my parting 2 messages are, well, first of all, don't run when you're wearing a hood and your peripheral vision is obstructed. Number 2, maybe even don't run with your cat on a leash as a basic statement. But seriously, the 2 messages I would leave you with are, reach out from your heart and from your mind and stay connected to people who are like-minded and who care enough about you to want to support you and be there for you and assist when they can, even if the assistance is nothing more than prayer, even prayer from a distance. I believe it was Jesus who said, whenever 2 or more of you are gathered, right? So whenever 2 or more of us are gathered, the power of our hearts and our minds, it grows exponentially. And that's the beauty of what I experienced when my 3 friends intervened, actually 3 friends and a daughter, intervened from their hearts and from their minds to help me through that experience. And the second message is, figure out a way to, I can't say get off of, because our lives are tied to this stuff, the technology, the iPhone, the computer, the email. But try to set up some kind of a schedule. Even take a day, and if you can do it without withdrawal, shut it all off and just experience not the 9 days that I did, but experience 24 hours without it. And I think once you get past the shakes, and once you get past reaching for the phone, you'll begin to experience what I did, the sights and the sounds and the feelings and the wonder of being fully human on a planet that was designed for just that. Being human, being connected both to one another and to nature, to all things natural. I wish you a beautiful week. Thanks for listening. I'm Carol Gold. I'll be back here again next week. And until I am, by all means, think for yourself.
Carol thanks you for spending your valuable time with her. It is her mission to empower you to remember how smart and capable you are. Be sure to check out Carol's website, carolgold.com. That's Carol with an E, gold.com. Please leave a review and subscribe here so you'll be alerted to Carol's next podcast. Until then, above all else, remember, it's time to think for yourself.